Today we're going to talk about 10 different topics, one of which is starting with power conditioners. Now that's a controversial subject. Many people feel they make the sound a little quieter, a little blacker, as they say, with increased clarity and deeper bass response. But let's face it, it's controversial for a reason. And that reason is that, in my opinion, they do absolutely nothing. Why is that? How dare I say such a thing? It's because the power supply that reaches your components is relatively clean to begin with. But let's just say that it's not. So once it gets into the component, what happens? It passes through a series of regulators, filters, and by the time it gets into your DAC, your preamp, or your amplifier, it should be pure DC. If it wasn't DC, you'd have noise and hum coming out of your amplifier or DAC. You'd have increased distortion, but you don't have that because according to Audio Science Review, which has measured probably hundreds of DACs and preamps and amplifiers, the noise levels on almost all those components, and I've done a survey of their site and of their measurements, show that the noise levels and distortion are almost inaudible. In fact, they are inaudible because they're below 100 dBs and the distortion is down to like 0.001. So what does a power conditioner do? Does it make inaudible more inaudible? Does it make noiseless even more noiseless? So that reminds me of a Billy Preston song, "Nothing from nothing leaves nothing." So basically it's either super inaudible, it's super, super quiet, or maybe it's just a waste of money. You decide. This next topic is about vinyl. It's titled Digital Vinyl. Why would I say that? Well, we'll get into it in a moment. But the bottom line is, I'm a vinyl lover. Obviously, I am. Look behind me. There's tons of records here. Most of the ones you see behind me were purchased in around the year 2000 or so, and got them pretty inexpensively. Rockaway Records is where I bought the vast majority of my vinyl. Believe it or not, most were only $1. Well, now they're probably, I don't know, $18 to $24. New vinyl recordings are probably around, let me see here. I believe this one was $34.95. This is the new David Gilmour album. It's pretty good. It sounds like David Gilmour. He wasn't that great of a singer, but he does play well. So with all that said, here's the crux of the matter. All vinyl made today, and I'm going to say all because it's like 99.9% is mastered digitally. It's obviously pressed in an analog format. Here's this beautiful album by David Gilmour. Vinyl's pretty. It's probably recorded, I can't say for sure, at high resolution digital. So bottom line is just this. You're looking to buy vinyl because it's an analog format. It's warm. It does sound warm. But you know what? Probably the digital file is more accurate. I know it's pretty to look at. It's great, but almost all vinyl recorded today is digital vinyl. So there's the title. There you have it. All vinyl now digital. Most vinyl that was recorded, say, prior to 1985 or so, is done in analog, and you can certainly tell the difference. Topic number 3, something you may not have heard of, but it's very important with any kind of connectivity, wires, including speaker wires, RCA wires, other wires. It's about what's called dielectric. What is a dielectric? Dielectric is the layer between the electrical signal and the outside world, or the electrical signal between other parts of other electrical signals. So why is that important? Well, dielectrics are used in capacitors, and they're used in capacitors to help store energy. It provides a type of an insulator, I should say, between the active part of the capacitor, which is the foil, and the passive part, which is the dielectric. It allows it to store energy. That's another topic entirely. We'll talk about capacitors later. Why is it important? Because dielectric, as I said before, helps protect the energy source, but it also stores energy. It absorbs it and releases it. Now, it does it in a minuscule way. Let's face it, there's no giant voltages here in our circuits, but here's the problem. This is a PVC dielectric. It's probably one of the worst you can get. It's used in cheap speaker cables, or maybe even expensive ones. They don't even tell you sometimes. We don't want PVC because it's a very poor dielectric. Yes, it does shield, and yes, it does protect it from short circuits, but it stores energy. So as the current or voltage goes down through this bad boy here, some of the voltage is stored, some of the signal is stored in the dielectric and released maybe, I don't know, a minuscule amount later, but it's enough to smear the image and to cause some minor levels of distortion. We don't want that. We can avoid that if we move up to a better dielectric. What's one of the best dielectrics? Well, air. Of course, but we have to have some shielding and some protection from short circuits. The next best, probably in my opinion, is magnet wire. The dielectric is going to be enamel painted on, very, very thin coat. This is what's used in your inductance coils or your coils in your crossover. There's yards and yards of this stuff, maybe 50, maybe even 100 feet of it. It's got a pretty good dielectric. It's not pretty, it's pretty stiff, and it doesn't provide much protection from scuff and wear and tear. Next better dielectric, in fact, one of the best dielectrics is Teflon, or FTPE insulation. It's a very good dielectric. It provides good protection. It obviously is slippery, so it doesn't get kinked up very easily. And this dielectric here causes very little distortion and very little absorption of the audio frequency waveform. So, best dielectric, no dielectric, air. Can't do it, not happening. Next best, very thin enamel, not much protection. Worst, PVC, polyvinyl chloride, terrible. Teflon, the best. Okay, for our next topic, we're going to talk about CD players and CDs in general. We'll keep this short and sweet because it's simple. CD players are obsolete. One of the reasons they're hardly making any anymore, and they do make a few, they're still out there, is that the technology, although excellent, as you can see here in this CDB471 Magnavox made in the very early days of CD, like in the early 1990s, uses the TDA 1541 DAC chip, which is a really good DAC. Well loved, but the problem being is that despite the greatness of these DAC chips and even new DAC chips, the CD player is obsolete because you can simply just put a CD in a computer or a laptop, go ahead and rip it to a high quality drive. It does a really good job at error correction, better than the CD player does, I might add, because the circuitry is so much more advanced in a PC. It can reread and reread again and make sure it's completely bit perfect. In fact, there's a program called Bit Perfect out there. I play it back through JRiver to a high quality DAC that uses a Sabre DAC. I'm a big fan of Sabre. I know that people like other DACs as well, and like the ones that are the Velvet Sound DACs, which will remain unnamed. In my opinion, Velvet Sound means loss of detail, but I like the Sabre DACs because of the increase in detail and just sounds better to my ears. But why buy a CD player when you can rip the disc, high quality, send it out to a DAC via USB, and you've got a much better digital format to listen to, in my opinion. Don't pay for the label, pay for the sound. That's a pet peeve of mine that really gets me burnt on this one. What really gets me burned is looking at people's speakers or other components when I know damn well there's next to nothing as far as cost goes. And when I say that, what I mean is you've got a $100 tweeter and a $150 woofer or main driver in there, and you got a $300 box, and you're going to charge $4,000 for the thing. So, and yes, we do have some speakers to sell for that kind of money, but let me tell you why that is. For example, in our newest model coming out, the Shinzitsu Samurai, it uses a $600 AMT transformer. That's for one, that's not for two, that's for one. Uses a Mark Audio driver, which is about 138 bucks. The cabinet's $300 to make. The capacitor and other parts in there add up to about, I don't know, $300 or $400. So you're looking at a price of, say, $1,750 or so maybe total. Then there's labor of 20 hours involved. So all we do is we charge parts and labor like anyone else would. But when I see a speaker, for example, that goes for $850,000, and I look at the cost of a Ferrari that's got thousands of moving parts in it, and yeah, plenty of advertising to sell Ferraris, plenty of high-level endorsements, magazine ads. They put a lot of money into it. But is a speaker worth $850,000? What could possibly be in that speaker that adds up to be that much? And you know what? Most of these speakers and other products use off-the-shelf components. Some of these designs have been around for decades. In fact, most tube amplifiers that are built even today are using circuits and diagrams from the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. There's really nothing new in tube audio, but yet I see all kinds of tube amplifiers for $9,000, $19,000, maybe even more than that. And it's got maybe, I don't know, $500 worth of parts. You can build a great tube amplifier for well under $1,000 that'll outperform or perform at least as good as any other tube amplifier on the market. So you can tell I'm kind of riled up about this. That's my pet peeve. And we move on to another more calmer topic. Dipole speakers. What's a dipole? Simply put, a speaker that sends sound backwards and forwards at the same time. Sounds like kind of a strange concept. A lot of people feel that dipoles provide a more holographic experience, a more holistic listening environment. What they really provide is a whole lot of interference with the front wave. Can you imagine a trumpet having a bell in the front and a bell in the back at the same time? What would that sound like in an orchestra? Not great, I don't think. So I've had plenty of dipoles, and I like them for their nice surround sound, their holographic sound all around them. But the problem is I never got great imaging out of them. I've had magneplaners, I've had got electrostats, various types of magnetic planar speakers, high layer motion transformers, which are a dipole. The ones we use now from Weimar are not dipoles. All it does is provide interference, the front wave interferes with the back wave at some sound frequency. It could be starting at 2,000 hertz. It could be higher than that. It does what's called comb filtering, where the front and the back interfere with each other. So we just have a problem. So I don't like dipoles. I don't recommend them. Dipoles need to go. Speaking of the freeways here in Arizona, more drivers, disagreeable vibes. Talk about road rage. Well, anyway, let's talk about why more drivers in a speaker is not a really great idea. They think that by adding, some manufacturers, I shouldn't say they, feel like adding maybe like 10 tweeters, 8 mid-ranges, and 4 woofers makes for a very coherent sound experience. The mere thought of all that should put you off, because here's the thing. Can you have 8 camera lenses or 10 camera lenses all focusing exactly at the same place, exactly at the same time, exactly at the same distance, and get a well-focused picture? You can't. And that's what happens to sound. You have 10 or 8 tweeters, you've got 4 mid-ranges, and you've got 3 woofers. It's bound to be a mess. So more drivers, disagreement as to focus, as where they're all focusing to, providing a nice coherent phase, coherent soundscape. It's not happening. You just get a big mess. So simpler is better. That's our philosophy. We normally use 2 drivers. In fact, all our speakers use 2. They're in phase. They're precisely focused. That's where the sound stage is at. People who complain of a poor sound stage, or they can't seem to get the sound focused the way they want in their speaker system, look at how many drivers you're pushing here. And many of you know I'm a tube guy. I love vacuum tubes. They're the most linear amplification device ever made. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only type of amplification that you should have. I have transistor amplifiers. They're nice, they're precise, but they ain't no life in those babies. So let's get down to something here that's interesting. Tube buffers. There's a zillion of them sold out here. This one here is made for headphones, but it also provides, I guess, a preamp type of an output. It's a nice little device. They run the tube at a very low voltage, way below what it's rated for, but they want to get that tube buffer sound. So what's a tube buffer sound? It is kind of, how can I say this? A fog that overlays the music that makes it sound sweet. It rounds off the edges. It takes digital and makes it sound a little more appealing. It's a sound device. It's a noise device. It is a alteration of the audio signal device. Do I use one? Well, I got one in my hand here. I plug my headphone into it. It's better than the sound I get out of my cheap headphone amplifier that's in my computer, so it sounds pretty good. Does it do any amplification? I don't think the tube does, but I do believe that the chips inside do. I can see some chips in here, so with the tube out, it doesn't play at all, but that's part of the deal. It's got a pretty LED at the bottom, though, that makes it look really nice when it's plugged in. But tube buffers, I think, are a digital type of, not a digital, but a type of fog that overlays the music. Tube buffers. Now this is a touchy subject. Belt drive, idler wheel drive, and direct drive. We're talking about turntables here, so turntable aficionados, vinyl aficionados are strongly opinionated on this matter, but let's get down to the nuts and bolts of the situation. The quietest drive is a direct drive turntable. Now you might say, oh my gosh, the rubber belt, that insulates the sound from the motor to the platter. To some degree it does, yes, but it also has more rumble, which is the sound of low frequency noise entering into the cartridge. Wow and flutter, which is the row sound, because a rubber belt stretches. Direct drive does not. And then there's always the issue of, oh, well, direct drives, they have a quartz drive and it's hunting and pecking and searching for the right frequency. It does it at thousands of times per second. It's completely inaudible. And if you've noticed recently, you can't hardly find any rumble and wow and flutter figures for any modern turntables. Sometimes you see them, that's true. But back in the day, back when Stereo Review was a big magazine and Audiophile was just basically starting out, every turntable that they made that was reviewed had rumble and wow and flutter figures published. So you could choose, oh, well, this is a nice turntable, but it's got too much noise. I'm not going to use that one. Or this one here has got really low noise, but I don't like the way it's designed. That's all well and good. But when you're just making a blanket statement of belt drives are superior because they sound better, they probably sound better for who knows what reason. Maybe it's a placebo effect, but quite frankly, they're not quieter. They don't provide a stable drive. But here's the drop the mic clincher moment. All vinyl records are cut with a direct drive turntable. In fact, they use the Technics motor for most of those turntables. So every record you hear, except maybe something from the 1940s, is got a direct drive turntable lay that made it. So why wouldn't you want to reproduce it with the same type of drive that it was recorded with? Last topic, you're probably glad to hear that. Let's talk about Frankenstein-ing your music, digital signal processing. What is it? Well, many of you use it, so most of you know what it is. But for those who don't know what it is when you take an audio signal and you push it through a device that alters its phase, its frequency response, and a few other characteristics, you're processing that signal into something that will better fit your taste, better fit your room acoustics. Some people say it's necessary to tune the room and the speakers together so that they have a harmonious relationship. Well, as you know about relationships, sometimes shoehorning something together isn't the best way to go. I'm kind of a purist. I admit that. You probably know that because of tubes and vinyl. So the bottom line is the less processing, the better. You should have speakers that have a linear response that you can see their frequency response curves of. And by the way, anyone that's not willing to send you a frequency response curve of their speakers, in my opinion, is hiding something. So with that said, we have enough processing going on in the digital DAC chip if you like digital. I do listen to digital. I don't need more processing. I need simplicity and purity and fidelity. That's what hi-fi means.